Me, a teenager. If she suddenly stood here, now, before me, would I need to treat her near and dear, although she's strange to me and distant? This chilling verse belongs to Polish poet Wisława Szymborska, where she describes a meeting between herself and her teen self. An encounter not particularly warm and successful, by the way.
Today, in the first podcast of 2021, we decided to talk about a subject that's taken on almost all platforms, from college compositions to stand-up comedies, from celebrity interviews to psychotherapy.
And one that is relevant in view of Turkey's agenda, with increasing youth unemployment, rising desire of young people to leave Turkey and go abroad, and recent student protests.
And here is the question of this podcast. What advice would you give to your younger self? A simple Google search alone yields millions of pages on this question. So it must be really a fashionable subject in our time.
It's also profoundly confusing and conflicting, just like New Year resolutions.
Yes, some tell young people, be cooler about who you are.
And others, be prepared to work harder.
Cultivate a variety of relationships.
But no, focus on one thing at a time.
And some tell, you cannot have it all.
No, says an opposing chorus. You can have it all.
Make the search in Turkish language and you come across many different viewpoints as well. Learn to drink without making a fool of yourself, says one podcaster. And he goes on with, throw away your televisions and volunteer to travel the world. More conservative sites urge teenagers to pray regularly and strengthen their faith.
That is the whole thing about advice. There is so much of it around. Plus, it often says more about the person giving it rather than the person at the receiving end.
So let's learn a bit more about you. What advice would you give to yourself at 17?
You mean right on the brink of legal age and about to choose my university?
Yes, it is an age that we make a lot of stressful decisions, such as choosing a university, which to a large extent determines our career. It's an age that we are on the brink of adulthood, but not quite independent, neither emotionally nor financially.
No wonder that we are stressed at that age. You know, the 2017 Global Youth Wellbeing Index has found that the Turkish youth was the most stressed among the 29 countries researched. The report said that the Turkish youth, that is, between ages of 10 and 24, was more or less in the middle as far as youth well-being goes. Not quite Sweden, which is the top, but better than Russia. This was assessed according to 7 different domains, including gender equality, a problematic area in Turkey, and communication technology, where Turkey rates well. But when the young people were asked whether they were under stress, 72% said that they were, which was even higher than countries like Japan or South Korea, where there is a lot of emphasis on success.
Also very competitive countries without any work-life balance. So would that be your advice to your 17-year-old self? Stress less?
Oh, as if she would listen. The most I could get away with is to tell her to be calm now, because there would be a lot more stress in the years to come.
You know, stress is a combination of passion, perfectionism, and self-inadequacy. I'd like to tell my 17-year-old version to love herself first. I know this sounds interesting to most of today's youth, as they are suffering from too much self-love, but in our time, oh my God, I never thought I would use these words one day. In our time, again, we were conditioned to constantly prove ourselves to be liked, loved, approved. So, dear my 17-year-old self, you are good enough. Love yourself. And of course, when you love yourself, you do not kill yourself while studying or working. You have a more balanced life. But yes, it took me 3 decades to realize this and appreciate nature, meditate, walk, listen to music as much as work.
We differ so profoundly, talk and think about completely different things. She knows next to nothing, but with a doggedness deserving better causes. I know much more, but not for sure.
I also like Szymborska's poems. But are you trying to avoid giving advice by constantly going back to the poem?
Yes, indeed. 2 reasons for this. First is that I'm scared of my 17-year-old self. She wanted to achieve so much, and I'm not sure my 50-year-old self will measure up. She wanted Pulitzer before 30.
Well, you still have time.
But shouldn't I try Booker instead?
You should.
The other reason is that I know any advice I would give to my younger self in the 20th century is vastly different than the one I would give to a teenager now in the second decade of the 21st century.
Definitely. But there are still some humane issues and values that should span across centuries, no?
Sure. And of course, I'm advising her with hindsight. In the next 30 years of her life, my 17-year-old self will see a digital revolution, the Me Too movement, and even, in fact, a much welcome amendment to the Turkish civil law that says the husband is no longer the head of the family.
Surely there will be many other digital revolutions, social, political, and economic changes from now on as well. But we adapt with time, which brings me to my advice, both to my young self and to today's young people. Choose a career you really want, not what your parents want. As years go by, we see so many people depressed at their 40s and 50s doing the jobs their parents wanted them to do. The courageous ones change their course regardless of their age. There's always that option, fortunately. But one should know that everybody and everything is temporary. The only thing we will be stuck with is our love of our work, if we make the right choice.
Amen to that. In this vein, I would like to advise her to learn more foreign languages than one, and ideally one that would enable her to communicate outside the Western world, such as French that would enable her to travel in parts of Africa, or Spanish, or actually Arabic. I would strongly urge her to get this done before her 20s.
And English, of course. You didn't mention it, probably because it goes without saying. English is the main language of the world, and it's such a pleasure and actually a must to read both literary and scientific books in their original language. And of course, it's same with the films, because so many things are missed, lost during translation. And isn't it great to be able to communicate with people from all around the world? Like we reach many listeners from Indonesia to the US, from Tanzania to Norway through these English podcasts.
That is actually a great pleasure, particularly when they write back with their views. We should both advise our 17-year-old selves to buy less. They would have to move around so much.
Yes, and they should travel light too. Unlike their grandparents, I think we are in between.
That is true. The second piece of advice I would like to give would be on the importance of positive signs. It was clear from early on that I would pursue a career based on the written word, literature, social science, etc. So I sort of got away with very bare minimums of positive signs. I wish someone had told me that a solid knowledge of positive signs, physics, statistics, biology, even a bit of chemistry would come useful as a journalist, as a lobbyist, or even as a bureaucrat. In the age of post-truth, fake news and manipulated information, knowledge on positive sciences and a scientific mind would be her safeguard. I would like to advise her that.
Right. At least she could come to her conclusion on COVID-19 vaccine. But to be honest, I would advise mine to learn carpentry, as she will be spending billions on constructors, electricians, and plumbers in the coming decades. But I know stupid she, would belittle manual work. I would love to have such skills now, really.
Okay, enough of work. Do you think we could win our teenage selves over advice on matters of the heart?
Oh, definitely. I'd like our young selves to read the short comic book called The Missing Piece Meets the Big O by the American author and cartoonist Shel Silverstein. In my opinion, he tells everything there to know about true love.
Really? What is it?
Well, he tells the tale of a lonely little piece of pie, a little wedge, that dreams of finding her missing part so that they can be complete and round again and roll together. Various shapes come by, but none are quite right. Some are too big for her, some are too small, some have too many missing parts. At last, a shape comes by that looks completely different. It has no piece missing at all and introduces himself as the Big O. Our little piece is overjoyed, asks whether she can join him. The Big O says, "No, first you have to be round yourself to be able to roll with me." She says, "But I cannot. I have sharp corners." The Big O says, "You should work on them. and wear them out.
And if you don't, your bad bosses or bad lovers will, clumsily and damagingly.
Indeed. Fortunately, the little piece starts rolling by herself and her sharp corners wear off. She then becomes well-rounded and then she meets the big O again and they roll happily after. So the takeaway from this story is true love doesn't complete us, but lets us grow and helps us become more fully ourselves. It's a moving story, especially for those of us who suffer from savior or victim syndromes and seek a partner to either fix or to be fixed by. As you said, the result there is often disastrous, disappointing, and never salvation or true love.
So what's your advice in a nutshell?
I am advising our young selves to have their own round worlds, so that whoever offers them the world, they can say they have their own. This also gives them the chance to stay by themselves, live a single, whole life. But enough of my advices. What's your advice on the romantic side?
Well, I would tell her that one's love life is not always like a novel, but a book of short stories, or even better, a book of poems, loaded with strong emotions, no matter how short. Actually, better when short. I think, as we discussed in the past episodes, we are of the generation that is brought up on fairy tales that ended happily ever after. And some of the expectations we had were a lot of nonsense.
Such as claiming that men and women needed to be in a couple to be whole and fulfilled. A view that's pumped up by conservative and populist governments all around the world.
Yes, I would like to tell her that motherhood was a choice, not a necessity, and certainly not a rank. Resist all attempts to force gender roles on you, I would tell her, hoping she'd remember that when she has to struggle against the conservative agenda in the 21st century.
Yes, and politicians who tell her that a woman without a child is half a woman, and that decent women don't laugh in public.
Let's laugh to that. I would tell her that civil disobedience is a right, and that she would need to question how power is used. Also, that she should stand up for rights of those who cannot. She would need to learn to speak up early on for minorities, for journalists in prison, women abused, non-governmental groups silenced. I would like to tell her to uphold humor, razor-sharp humor, and satire as a tool of resistance and resilience, and that humor would come in handy in all the protests she would have to attend in 30 years' time. And what is more, she would have to defend humorists and cartoonists who would come under attack.
Yes, laughter is the best medicine for stress as well. They should laugh out loud and make others laugh. Nothing should be exaggerated that much. It's important to make this journey in a playful way, with companions, friends, whom we have to be generous with.
And keep in touch with those who are now geographically or intellectually distant.
Certainly, and not to act as if we have a balance at the heart. Sometimes we put an effort a bit more, and sometimes someone else.
Sure, and be kind to others, but not at the expense of self-sacrifice. Self-sacrifice is hugely overrated, like politically correct. That's also overrated.
Right. You can be kind to people without trying to show this to others. You do not need to prove your kindness and even yourself to others.
And certainly do not rub your kindness to everybody's face.
Yes, that's a perfect recipe for social distancing. For people who get away from you. But I want to add something to the proving yourself to the other side. Hey, our young selves, you do not need to prove anything to any person in this world. People may challenge you, saying you cannot do it, or you are not courageous enough, you are not a real man, you are not a real woman, you are not free enough or good enough. And all these vicious challenges are to make you smoke, use drugs, or whatever. There is nothing to prove to anybody. This is the only place you can say, yes, I am not good enough, courageous enough, man enough, woman enough. What the hell?
What the hell indeed. But God, we have come up with such a huge list, worse than our moms.
So after facing with our worst fear, looking like our moms, we can end this podcast in peace.
No, let's have just a few more. I still have to tell my 17-year-old self to only date men who have huge libraries and Neverland books, and never let Penguin Book of Interviews out of your sight, because once lost, you cannot get a new copy. Just saying.
Are you trying to imply that I should return your books? You can say it openly.
A word to the wise.
Perhaps the best advice is that there would be change all the time, particularly in Turkey. Simply do what you think is best.
And keep in mind that the loser in your class may be appointed a minister or a university rector eventually. Just saying.
Yes, you will see your mother was not right about anything. You did your best under the circumstances.
Wait. This time I have a bit of guerrilla advice. Dear younger us, I'm talking to you. Don't worry, you'll get much better with age.